Honourable Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I too want to express my thank yous to the ministry. You have been basically a pillar in the community with respect to many things like home help, child care, and so on. My thoughts, though, I will be quick on it, lead to the comment made with respect to what used to be Sterling's Children's Home. And I could only congratulate you on the efforts you're making towards housing the elderly, as well as nursery occupants, I think you said. I will be asking, if this will also encompass the younger groups beyond nursery age, in other words, what Sterling used to be before. I'm still worried about that age group, as I always express every year in the well, in terms of transition to normal society. I know at one point they were considering halfway housing for those individuals who have passed the age to be housed in that community, I guess beyond 18, I think it is. I heard about the One Family program, which had many initiatives, which impressed me really in terms of getting these individuals and families out to the community. Health education and the like, I guess budgeting and so on. What is on offer for these young people as they transition out of the children's homes? This is my first question.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. As I said, you would recall that the actual 3 facilities that were at Sterling, the 3 cottages, we used to call them, were facilities for persons who were transitioning. We used to call them transitional homes. They're still there. I'm told by the Director of Child Care Board as well that the new facility at Bullins will also have some transitional homes to allow people to, because after you leave child care, the truth is the Child Care Board is a good facility. In many ways, the Child Care Board provides children things that other children do not have. I mean, people may not be surprised to hear that. But you could leave the Child Care Board with not the preparation for the real world. And I think the idea behind the transitional housing was to allow people to transition from a care institution to the real world. And I think, so this leads me to 2 conclusions. The first is that we have to make living in a child care facility as close to real life as possible, so that the need to put people in a transitional home is less. That's the first thing. We need to make the experience in a child care facility a real life experience. Children got to do the chores like any other child. I strongly feel the time has come for us to take Child Care Board off of every single vehicle. It does not look good. Children do not feel good going to school with a vehicle that says Child Care Board. It's just a vehicle. So that children have a more regular experience when they interact with the agencies. And then the second thing I think we must do is to have a few, because the truth is, when you leave a child care facility, when people know you've been in child care, it's like any other institution. Barbadians attach a stigma sometimes, and it's really painful. So some people, their own family do not want them back. There's no place for them to go. And that's why we need the transitional facilities. And I'm told we're going to have a few more transitional facilities at Bullins, which is the new facility that we're building at Bullins, as we build out. But I take the point, and I do think that there probably could also be an additional few houses, because we're putting houses at Sterling. We could also make the space for some transitional housing at Sterling as well. So I take the point. I think the director might want to add something.
Good afternoon. My name is Roseanne Richards. I'm the director of the Child Care Board. And to continue from where the minister left off, we are now in the process of constructing a new state-of-the-art residential facility at Bullins and Lord Holders, St. James. And that facility would be done in partnership with the Barbados Children's Trust. And we are hoping to have, apart from the residences where the children between the ages of 12 and 18 would be accommodated, that on leaving that facility, we're going to have a few transitional homes within the same compound. As well as the transitional homes, we're also going to be able to have a section of the new facility where they'll be able to be exposed to things like haircutting and barbering and hairdressing if they want to enter into the arts therapy program, doing things like nails and lashes. Some of them will be exposed to that, and they will also be exposed to other skills in terms of preparing them for work in the tourism sector, as the facility will be very much in the areas associated with tourism in Barbados, which is on the West Coast. But for the most part, what we try to do before they get there is that we try to reunite the children with their families once they're approaching the age to graduate from our care. So that is still very much something that we continue to do as far as possible, especially where there are families that they can return to.
Thank you very much for that, and it gives me a little more hope, because a lot of these children, I shouldn't say a lot, I suspect, and I haven't done any formal research, that basically when young people have nowhere to go, nothing to do, no training, idle hands, and this is one of my worries, the cycle, whether it's more reliance on welfare if you don't have the training for the workplace, and it continues to be a cycle. You mentioned also at Sterling's housing the disabled. Congratulations on that. I am wondering as well, we have all heard over the last few years the Ministry of Health, ergo the hospital, complaining about those individuals who are considered young for care, that are not ill necessarily. We have the elderly for care and the young for care. Will your institution incorporate any of these individuals? They are badly in need of somewhere to go. Too young for the geriatric hospital, too disabled, if you want to say, for home. Will this incorporate any of those individuals? And with that, the last thing I think is, will your homes for the elderly also include daycare facilities for the elderly? Because I'm noticing that is I would say, increasing need in the community. I have quite a few individuals around me that do not want to, for a better word, commit their relatives, parents, and so on into the nursing homes, but would be appreciative of a daycare facility where they could just do the pickup coming home from work.
In relation to the question on what you call the young for care persons, originally I wouldn't say that we were building out the facility for that purpose. I recognize though that there are a number of people who are falling between the cracks. They're not in the category. And as an MP, it happens, you know, you see somebody who is too young to get into geriatric hospital but desperately need care. Our philosophical, ideological position in the ministry was that we have a system of care in place, and it varies. So if it's old age in place. If it's a person with disability, the care in place, and so on. Which means that if a person is in need of care, the best solution is for us to be able to offer care in a family that they come from, and not to continuously build up facilities, or we will create a system of institutions and facilities where the modern thinking is that it is best to have people in the household. So we spend a lot of time now working with families, asking them to, take on their relatives or to care for their relatives. I think what we may have to look at is a level of support to families to be able to do that, to make sure that families can afford to care for their family. There are other countries in the world that have done it. Obviously, some that have a lot more means than we have, like the ones that was mentioned by the opposition leader, they have means. But there are many countries that have gone on to do something like that. It's something we should look at. The other thing is that we do offer some care, though, to persons who are between that age. We offer at the facility, the Clyde Gollop shelter, but it's a shelter. Nobody really wants to be in a shelter, you understand? But we offer facilities for persons who are in the need of care and do not have a home. So we offer that facility there. Perhaps we could expand it, but I genuinely believe that the best approach to solving this problem is to care in place. And that means that we have to look at what are the reasons, the factors that are driving these persons who are not too old, and some cases not too sick, some may be sick but not too sick, from being able to live in a space that they feel comfortable, and then to rectify at its source problem. I think the PS wanted to address the question in relation to Sterling.
Jay Hubel, Chair Permanent Secretary. In response to the question in relation to Sterling pertaining to the daycare facility. That is the plan that we have developed to renovate the existing structure, the existing building that formerly housed the Sterling Children's Home, and turn that into a daycare facility for the elderly, because we do recognize that that model is a model that will certainly assist those working persons who would need to provide care in a facility such as a daycare facility, and that is the plan that we have developed. We have sent that proposal to the minister. I do believe that the minister at some point will be taking that to cabinet.
Just very quickly, Chair. Look, I am convinced that daycare is a critical part of our toolkit. Critical. I've had conversations with the cabinet and others about the need to build out daycare facilities. Even if you were to do one at Sterling, you could accommodate 60 persons easily. The truth is that if you're going to age in place, it means that at the end of the day, if you have a person who has dementia, for example, they go to a daycare facility, the person goes to work, the child or the family goes to work, and in the evening they pick up their relative and they go home. If you do not have a facility where people can be cared for during the day, you have difficulty going to work. And it means that instead of caring for that person in place, invariably, it ends up with you having to put a relative that, if you offer the support, otherwise you could care for. It means you end up putting them in an institution, which runs contrary to modern thinking in relation to care. So I think daycare is going to be a big component of what we offer. I think we need to have a daycare facility, if I'm being honest, in the north, the south, the east, and the west, just to begin with, because it allows us to deal with the aging population. In Barbados now, 1 in 5 persons are over 25. It's over 25. And 1 in 4, I think, is over 20. That makes Barbados, in the narrative, in the language and literature, a country is considered to be super-aged if it reaches 21% of the population over 65. We are at 20%. Barbados is a very old country and society. We are almost a perfect textbook definition of super-aged, which means that the existing infrastructure won't do. It will not do. So we do need the residences that we're building. I want to commend the Prime Minister for the support that have been given to build out these residences. And I want to commend her as well for the support to be able to do some daycare. And we've had these conversations, not with ourselves, we've had these conversations with BARP, and we've had these conversations with Sir Optimus. But I do take the point that daycare has to be an important component as well.
Last comment, Mr. Chair. Yes, I hear what you said about the family dynamic with respect to, for the, I guess, young fakir. But the truth is my concern, and I have 1, 2, 3 too many, where when I started practice, the parents were probably 40, and 30 years later, they're now in their 70s, and they worry. I was working for a little while, yeah. They're now in their 70s, and the worry is where to put my disabled children, or not even disabled. I don't want to use the word disabled. They might not necessarily have started disabled. Some of them had accidents, can walk, so on. So that is a real concern within the community, and hopefully before I leave the world, I would like to see that addressed in Barbados. We spend a lot of time on the elderly, and they have the just time. But at the same time, we still have to remember that there are other members of the community that really need housing and help. I congratulate you on your home care program. The truth is, it's excellent, but maybe the thought will go through into, because really and truly, they spend a few minutes in a home and go. Sometimes people need a little more care, not medical, but a little more care and training in how to deal with Alzheimer's people and so on. So once again, I congratulate the ministry, and that is it from me. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Minister.
So, Honourable Member, I agree. I think I misunderstood your question originally in relation to the young for care, because the facility at Sterling will accommodate persons with disabilities regardless of their age, as long as they're in need of care. So that doesn't have an age limit. That is for persons who need the assistance. The truth is we might need more than one, because there are quite a few persons. I read a story this week alone, I don't know if you all saw it, there was a story that was carried in the international press of a lady who had received a terminal diagnosis, and she went home and she killed her disabled child, who was an adult, and herself. And this is a real story. And the reason she did it is because she knew that as soon as she was gone, she did not trust anyone to care for her child, her son. So she ended up killing herself and the child. And this thing puts a real mental pressure on parents, you know? And I think we have to fill that gap and give people a comfort that when I'm gone, there's going to be some facility in place to be able to look after my child. And in many developed states in the world, it's still not that comfort. That's the truth. And Barbados has to do a little bit better. So I definitely take the point. I read that story, and it got me a little teary-eyed, because the truth is, it could be anybody. You could wake up tomorrow with a disability. I could sit here and, as we saw with Pastor Jake, what's his last name? The international American priest who was giving his sermon, and in the middle of it, he almost had a stroke or something, and everybody saw. So I'm just saying these things happen, and sometimes in plain sight. P.S., I think wanted to speak about the dementia center.
Thank you, Minister. One fundamental issue that we face as a super-age society, and they say super-age, the question of a number of persons out there with dementia. And we consider that there is a need for a specialized, even though we are going to establish a daycare facility at Sterling, a part of that facility, a specialized section of that facility is going to be dedicated to persons with dementia. You know, I recall I had a relative that looked after an elderly relative with dementia for close to 2 decades, and it was not an easy task. These persons need to have some degree of respite, and in that regard, we'll be having some very consultations with the Alzheimer's Association with a view to ensuring that when that facility is established, we do it in the right ways to bring some degree of ease to those persons who are looking after their elderly relatives who have dementia. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will be brief. I want to continue on the road that we were on in terms of looking at a super-aged population. For me, what I see ahead of Barbados is an economic crisis actually arising from over this problem. Because as people get older and they retire, their income is decreased. They're unable to take care of their assets, like their homes, and so their homes fall into disrepair as the rising cost of living begins to affect them. Even middle-aged, middle-class seniors who in early retirement are comfortable will eventually find themselves in serious poverty. And without a doubt, we cannot house everyone. So my question is are there any plans for collaborations between the Ministry of Housing, Finance, and so on to look at a program of renovation and repair of the homes of seniors and come to an arrangement with their offspring to allow for them to gradually pay back the government for doing that renovation, or where that elderly person passes on, that house could be rented or leased so that the monies to government can be returned and then the family inherit it. I feel that there needs to be some program that is going to help. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of real estate property in serious deterioration and be unable to use it when we have a shortage of housing. And added to that, I want to know if it is possible for your ministry to start looking at an education program to help people put in place proper arrangements for real estate planning and their old age. As well as we already have a number of families who never sorted out property and land and so on. And it goes way back several generations. And right now, at a legal level, it is difficult to unravel it. But I don't think that we can sit and allow that to continue. So will you all look at coming up with some program for education and working with the Attorney General's office to come up with being able to resolve some of those legal issues?
Thanks, Honourable Member. So it would be nice. It would be nice to imagine a world where we could fix everybody's house. That's the truth. It would be nice to imagine that I could go in St. Michael South or you could go in St. James South and fix every old person's house. But to even begin, I wouldn't want anybody to believe that that's a promise we can make, because it becomes almost, when you start doing the math, and I've done the math, and I'll tell you why I did the math. When you start doing the math in relation to how much it would cost the state to be able to do it, it becomes almost like unbearable. One, that's just a blanket statement. Two, the other point we discussed was in relation to those who have properties, because there are many people who are asset rich and cash poor. To look at reverse mortgages. And I know a paper came to Cabinet in relation to reverse mortgages. It actually came to the ministry, and we supported the idea of a reverse mortgage to allow people to be able to do that. So that would take the burden off of the state in many cases, but yet get the same outcome that you are anticipating. Thirdly, I discussed a paper where we called it Mend a Mentor. And it is something that perhaps I should take back to the Cabinet, but it's just where we would offer, because I do it now at a constituency level, where I offer very basic repairs to the houses of the elderly. We clean the grass from around the house, we might do a paint job, we might change a window or two, but it makes a difference to the house. And it makes a difference to how the person feels about that house. And we normally spend maybe $1,500 the most. But the essence of that is not the state's responsibility. The essence of that is volunteerism and the family. So we ask the family to get involved, to be able to help do some of this work. You know what I would say here, Honourable Member? You know, there are many cases where you're doing something like this, where you're helping somebody's household. And there may be people in that household who refuse to help you help the household. So you might be going to clean up around the house, and people in the house refusing to help you clean around the house. Or we've had experiences where we were cleaning gutters in the constituency, and people who live close to the gutters refuse to help you clean the gutter. And I just think that there is a responsibility on all of us to be able to do the right thing for all of us. And therefore, I wouldn't want to commit the state, but that would be the three. And then fourthly, in relation to housing, there are many cases where housing, especially in state-owned houses, where housing have already gone forward and done significant repairs to a number of these facilities. We've had the good fortune of, when we make representation for elderly persons, that the government ministries have actually been fairly responsive. So yes, I would like to think we could do it. I wouldn't want to leave the country with the impression that it's something that we can afford to do. I don't think any country in the world can afford to do it. And then the other thing is, if you look at the percentage of our population that is now over 60, and the percentage of our population that will be over 60 in the next 10 years. At this rate, we can anticipate 50% of Barbados. It means that we're committing to repairing the houses for 50% of Barbados. It becomes a reality that we wouldn't be able to fulfill. But I do take the point that it cannot be left as it is. So 1, reverse mortgages. 2, small and simple repairs. 3, the state agencies currently responsible for housing responding where necessary. And 4, family members and community members stepping up and doing what families are supposed to do.
The other area of overstretched resources that your ministry faces is the issue of the demand on your welfare officers. And I know that you're doing rearrangements, I know you're trying to get more people and so on, but my question is, going forward, what will be put in place to be able to periodically give welfare officers a break from hearing negative demands all day long? Because emotionally and mentally, it will wear them out and wear them down, and the quality of service is actually going to diminish. So we don't want to get back to that again. So what are the plans for counseling or group therapies or sabbaticals or rotations, what is going to be put in place to help take care of those emotional needs to ensure that our welfare officers are in a good place to be able to truly help with a sympathetic and empathetic heart the needs of the Barbadian population.
I will let the Chief Welfare Officer acting deal with that question, but suffice it to say that this has also engaged the attention of Cabinet. And we had determined, as part of the amalgamation exercise, in terms of what we offer to the staff at welfare and the staff at childcare and the staff at the NAB, because a lot of these social workers are under severe pressure. And that's the truth. The pressure that comes to bear on a social work agency, and I want to thank you, Minister, for asking the question and for the empathy shown, because there are many people who do not appreciate what social workers have to go through. I do clinic, as most of us do, on a Wednesday. At the end of clinic, 1 day a week, sometimes at the end of the day, when you think about all the things that you cannot possibly respond to, it burdens your spirit, it burdens your soul, it affects your relationships. Welfare officers have to do that for years, childcare officers, NAB officers, and NDU officers. So we looked at putting in place, I know in some of the ministry, in the welfare, for example, they had already brought in somebody to offer some counseling to them so that they could deal with it. But I know when we brought it to Cabinet, the position was that perhaps we can, as part of our negotiation into the entry into the social empowerment agency, perhaps like we do for teachers, we can give social workers who would have worked consistently for 5 years or so, a few weeks off without any kind of discriminatory action toward them. Perhaps allow, as I've told PS before, flex days. Without even a harsh policy, somebody's put in the hours, just giving them some extra time and that kind of thing. I think a lot of this is going to come down to leadership and making sure that if we honor the workers, we treat them as if we honor them, and in the actual negotiations, perhaps we can put in place what the Prime Minister and I had discussed at the level of Cabinet, which is that if persons have worked for a long time, that perhaps we can give them a few weeks off, but with the support. The other thing before the Director speaks, I would say is that welfare officers, and I'm saying welfare because you said welfare, but the social workers in the ministry are people too. And there are many cases where, like anybody else, there are days where if you got 2 or 3 children, you got to hustle home to your children. People have a bad day. Some days, like anybody else, I'm sure all of us in here have days where we have no money too. And you're broke and you got to sit before somebody and those things. So I think it begins by understanding that all of our workers are more than workers. They're human beings and that they need to be treated as human beings. And I really appreciate the question, because I think there's a view in the ministry, particularly that the political class, over time, not this government, the political class over time, and I'm saying so because I've been in the social services sector for over 20 years, that they do not appreciate persons who work in this space. When I was appointed Minister of Social Care, the amount of people messaging me to offer commiserations was funny. They said, "What did you do to the Prime Minister? Why did the Prime Minister demote you? Why did this happen?" Because people see it that way, like a low-level job. And then they engage a lot of persons almost as if it's a low-level job. So I really appreciate the question, because I do not think Barbadians fully appreciate the amount of work that these social workers do. I do not think they fully appreciate the amount of work that the welfare officers specifically do. And when the Director speaks, I hope she tells you the amount of cases to officers in some instances and other issues that they have to deal with. So I'll pass over to the Director, to the Chief. Sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Bobwaith. I am the Acting Chief Welfare Officer. And indeed, I am happy that this question has been brought up, because for a long time we have been looking at how do we address the issue of the numbers to the welfare clients, to the officers, as well as the impact it's had on the team at the welfare department. We've been experiencing tremendous burnout, and in some cases, because we do understand the needs of the client, it's still, you're taking it home every single day and you're dealing with your own families as it relates to what has been happening to you. In most cases, my officers work even at night. So in order to facilitate the numbers, they're found working long hours. We've looked at things and we want that is embraced in the new amalgamated entity, things like flexi days, mental health days, where the agency is able to recognize where an officer has been going some time, and invariably because you are engaged in helping individuals, you yourself might not recognize there's a need for you yourself to take some time, so that be available for the individuals as well. Long leave being one, somewhat like how the teachers receive that leave after a point in time, you're given that time as it relates to it. And a lot of self-care. How do you treat to self-care in terms of the individuals? Right now, we are engaging with the Association of Social Work Association, and their conference this year deals with self-care. And we've encouraged our staff members, the social workers, please get on board in terms of attending that conference, because we know it would argue well for them in terms of the information not only they receive, but the activities that they would be engaged in order to help them care for themselves as they seek to address the needs of the country.
Yes, just briefly as well. You know, during one of the many meetings we had with the staff as we prepare for the amalgamation of these 4 entities, there was a particular meeting at the LESC Conference Center with the social workers in the various entities. And at the end of that meeting, a social worker got up and asked myself a question. It really had me thinking. After we have put in so much emotional effort during the day looking after the many clients that we deal with on a daily basis, who looks after us? And the new social empowerment agency, we are actually going to create a post of human resources officer, and a lot of the attention of that office is going to be just simply focused on the wellness of the social workers. Because the social workers now will have increased duties in terms of, instead of focusing exclusively, let's say, on the child, on a person with disability, and an elderly person, they're actually going to be providing a holistic service in terms of treating to the actual household, the actual family, instead of that, a narrow focus on a particular vulnerable person. Thank you.
Honourable member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to first start out by congratulating the Honourable Minister and his team for all the work that they have done over the last year in terms of improving the lives of the most vulnerable persons in this country. Notice one of the strategic goals of the ministry is to eradicate intergenerational poverty in the short to medium term, and in the long term to eliminate poverty on the whole. This is, of course, one of the issues that plague our country coming out of what colonial times, intergenerational poverty, and the more we can reduce that, the more we can reduce the amount of persons and the percentage of persons living below the poverty line in this country, the better. Of course, Mr. Chairman, a significant percentage of those who live below the poverty line are in fact persons with disabilities, and of course, as this Parliament knows full well, and as this country knows, this ministry has been the conduit through which, within the last 4 months, Parliament has implemented a national policy on disabilities, and just last month, Parliament has passed a Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, two acts by this Parliament, which I have certainly described as transformative, and among the pieces of legislation and policy with parliamentary approval, which rank among the most transformative ever passed in this parliament. And wish to ask the Honourable Minister, because as he referred to in last year's budget and budgetary and financial statements delivered by the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance in the middle of March, the Parliament of Barbados agreed to approve the expansion of categories of persons with disabilities who receive benefits from the National Insurance Scheme. Previously, it was only those who were blind or who were deaf without speech. And this Parliament expanded from the 1st of October those benefits to include persons who suffer from autism, multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, and Down syndrome. And asking the minister if he would support, and I know the Honourable Member of Parliament for Christchurch East Central did, and I take this opportunity to commend him and place this on the records of Parliament. But both him and clearly the Honourable Prime Minister, who is the substantive Minister of Finance. This is the first time, to my knowledge, that all members of Parliament, including backbenchers like myself and those members in the Senate, have been invited to submit recommendations for the budgetary proposals for this year's budget. That is novel, and that is something which ought to be done. And certainly I have, in my submissions to the Honourable Minister of State, Ministry of Finance, proposed that Parliament expand these benefits which were expanded last year and which the Honourable Minister has stated 653 additional persons are now beneficiaries to NIS benefits. And I propose that that be expanded to include children who are blind, in other words, those under 18 who are blind, those under 18 who are deaf, and those over 18, in other words, adults who have speech. And certainly that as a start, but also to expand the category to those who are mobility challenged as well. And my first question to the minister is, and also to remove the prohibition which has been there, I believe from the time the National Insurance Act came into effect in 1967, 1968, that if you are a person with a disability and you are working for $30 a week or more, you cannot access benefits from national insurance, or you can't access invalidity or disability allowance. That $30 per week has never been adjusted in the almost, certainly over 50 years. It has been enforced, despite, of course, the rates of inflation increasing tremendously. And I wish to ask the minister, Honourable Minister, if he and his ministry support the proposals to expand the category of persons who are now getting this benefits from the national insurance, and also to increase the amount of money a person with a disability who may have found a piece of employment or a bit of self-employment, because we can be looking to encourage persons with disabilities to become employed in a situation where 90% of them are not employed or self-employed, but yet you're saying that once they're making over $30 a week, which can't go anywhere whatsoever in terms of their subsistence, that they are not entitled to a subsidiary benefit from the National Insurance Scheme. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Member. First of all, thank you as well for supporting what was done in the Ministry in relation to persons with disabilities, but I also have to thank you as you spearheaded the vast majority of it, and I want to publicly commend you for your work in relation to improving the lives of persons with disabilities in Barbados. There are very few people who would have done as much for persons with disabilities as you have, and as Minister, I really want to thank you for what you would have done. In relation to your two questions, in relation to the first, the categories that we expanded, as you rightly stated, were cerebral, that we included, that were previously not included, were cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, multiple sclerosis, and autism. And that added a number of persons to the list and were able to benefit from government support that weren't getting government support before. And I know that they're thankful because we've had meetings with the community. I think when the Prime Minister spoke, the Prime Minister said these categories, because these are the categories that we gave to the Prime Minister and these are the conversations that we had. But the Prime Minister's intention was always clear. The Prime Minister had intended for persons who were not able to function as Minister of Finance, for persons who were not able to function because of their disability, to be able to benefit from government support. And we had listed these four, but it was always the intention to support persons with disabilities who would be unable to function because of that disability. And the unfortunate reality has been that there have been some disabilities, some without name, that have made it impossible for people, for children, adults sometimes, to be able to function. But because they were not among these four, they were not able to benefit. So you have persons whose disability may leave them at home, a person whose parents is not able to work because they have to take care of the child, but they're not one of these four. So the correction has to be made, and I know that we would have spoken to the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, so he is aware that this has to be corrected, as well as the Minister of Labour, who has responsibility for the NAS. So I anticipate that this is going to be corrected very soon, and that the intention of the government, and specifically the intention of the Prime Minister when she supported the proposal, was for us to be able to give support to all persons who are unable to function because of their disability. So I hope that answers the first question. In relation to the second question, that has always bothered me. A few nights ago, there was a program on the radio with persons with disabilities. And one of the things that they spoke of as being their personal reality is if they were to attempt to go and get a job, immediately they're cut. They're cut almost immediately. If you go and you do a job and you're paid 1 day's salary, and NAS receives the information that you've been paid 1 day's salary, you're cut. So persons with disabilities have often chosen not to work a short-term job that could supplement the limited income that they get, because in so doing, they are affected by their long-term governmental support. Now that is obviously discriminatory, and that is obviously not the intention, and it should not be the policy of a forward-thinking administration. As a consequence, again, we would have had the conversation about correcting that. The minister responsible for labor has told me that in the new work that he's bringing to this to this parliament very soon, it is actually going to correct that. And it would allow persons with disabilities to also be able to work to a point. Because the idea is that if you're making enough money from a job, then you would not need the government support. But however they've, in conversations with us, however we frame it, it is going to be to take out that discrimination that is currently very much alive in the legislation. So beyond just supporting you, Honourable Member, we are working actively to remedy what is a wrong that I'm sure nobody wants to see perpetuated over time.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. My first supplementary, Mr. Chairman, relates to education of persons with disabilities. And I note that the Honourable Minister of Education will also be intervening in this debate under this head and would have the opportunity to speak in terms of within that context as well. But of course, the national policy and the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Bill speak towards improvement in education for persons with disabilities. People who, it has been accepted, have been discriminated against for too long a period in terms of our educational system, which boast about having quote-unquote free education for over 60 years, but yet, as we know, Honourable Minister, firsthand from town hall meetings, certainly at the latest, that too many children with disabilities, their parents have to pay for their education. That's the practical effect. And the reality, in some cases, moving their children 9 times during the space of a school career, educational career. Giving you the opportunity, Honourable Minister, to speak towards now the implementation of improved education for persons with disabilities within the context of the national policy and the legislation.
Honourable Member, you and I would have sat through several sessions of the advisory committee where almost every single evening where we had these sessions, a parent of a child with disability would come and speak about the experiences in the educational system, some going back eons. Persons themselves with disabilities have also spoken about their experiences. We would have heard Janelle Oldell tell her story as part of the activities for the month of the disabled, and Senator Andwele also, and I think this year the Most Honourable Carrie-Ann, I feel, will tell her story in relation to her life experience, and so on. And almost without end and without question, it is always a case of the school environment was not necessarily the best. There's some experiences that were better than others and some that were not as good. But we would have had several meetings with the Ministry of Education, and I am comfortable that based on the conversations we've had with the ministry and the direction that I've seen the ministry go, as well as in their own writings beyond what we've written, I am satisfied that the Ministry of Education is moving at a quick pace in the right direction to rectify this. I suspect that if the Minister of Education were here, she would be able to tell you of the number of programs, because she's told me, the number of programs that are now being implemented to incorporate persons with disabilities in an inclusive fashion in the school environment. There are also going to be circumstances where persons with disabilities cannot be totally included, if we're being honest. And I know provisions are also being made to accommodate those as well. So I believe that children who have disabilities or the parents of children with disabilities can rest comforted in the fact that the Ministry of Education under the leadership of the member for St. Philip West is doing a remarkable job to rectify what really has been a circumstance that has discriminated against persons with disabilities for decades. In the ministry, additionally, we've also looked at some additional assistive devices. We were shown a pair of glasses. I've been telling my colleagues about it. A pair of glasses that if you are blind and you put on the glasses or you carry the glasses would say to you, if we were in this room, it could say to me, on my left, there are 3 persons sitting to your left. There are 4 persons to your right. And you say, what are the persons wearing? And I asked the PS who was in the room. The glasses would tell you what the persons are wearing. We put in our estimates some monies to be able to begin having those kind of assistive devices so that persons with disabilities could have a better opportunity while at school. So, I mean, I really do feel comfortable with the direction that the country is going in relation to persons with disabilities. So it would be remiss of me not to thank at this moment the Minister of Education really for all the amazing transformation that is happening in that space to assist persons with disabilities.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. My further supplementary, Mr. Chairman, relates to employment of persons with disabilities. And Honourable Minister, both you and I would have been party, well, particularly you, to a hard decision taken, admitting that we as a country are not yet ready for a quota system for employment of persons with disabilities in either the private or public sector. We recognize that we're not at that stage yet, but surely we need to encourage government departments and the leaders of business and commerce in this country to employ more persons with disabilities. What plans or strategies does your ministry have going forward into this financial year in its estimates to war that so that we can reduce the numbers and percentage of persons with disabilities who are qualified and who merit the position, sir, and who are, in my opinion, more deserving than a lot of people who may not have disabilities in terms of being able to work. Because, and I was struck, Mr. Chairman, when I spoke in the debate on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities bill, when I mentioned that persons with disabilities who are given an opportunity to work perform very well, and the employers say so publicly. And I made the context that one of the reasons for that, they're so grateful to get a job. They're not on the phone, on Facebook, during the day working hours, or gossiping about who had who last night, or who planned to harm who tonight. They're doing the work. And what strategies do we have in these estimates, Honourable Minister, to try to create strategies and programs to increase employment rate among persons with disabilities? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. So you spoke of the quota system. Now, the quota system we had imagined, and in the first draft of the legislation, there was a quota system. We had anticipated that a percentage of the private sector's employees should be persons with disabilities. And we had an even larger percentage for the public service. And I think we deleted that particular clause very late in the process. And I must tell you, Honourable Member, that I labored on that for a long time because I really felt that there should have been a quota system originally. But the quota system doesn't always work. And there are countries with quotas where the quotas are never met. We met with the Chinese when they were here, the persons representing persons with disabilities from China, and they told us that they have a quota system, but that the quota system is never met. We had a consultant, a Canadian consultant who works, but they were consulting to the Barbados Council for the Disabled, but we had a conversation, and they were very much against quotas as well. And then the community of persons with disabilities in Barbados was also split about whether there should be quotas or not. What really influenced me in the end was that ultimately, I think we have to prepare people for work. And it would be difficult to insist that a private sector person or a government employer employs the persons with disabilities just because. And there were other things that we needed to fix. And that is why I was saying I'm really happy with what the Ministry of Education is doing, because we have to give people who have disabilities the same quality education so that they have the same chance as somebody else. And currently the system is that if you go for a job, let's say the job is asking for 5 CSCs, and a person would say to you, well, anybody with 5 CSCs can get this job, so I'm not discriminating against persons with disabilities, because if they had 5 CSCs, they would get the job. But that's perpetuating a discrimination, because the likelihood of a person with disabilities in our education system, as has been the case for generations, is that that person is very unlikely to have those CSCs. So you say the system is based on merit, but the merit that is built into the system is a discriminatory merit. So we have to make sure that we offer people a level of training. We have to make sure that they have the qualifications so that we could then say, look, these persons have the skills you want, and make sure that they can argue for the job in that case. We also have to train up a lot more persons, and we've been busy doing that. I think the acting director of the National Disabilities Unit, I think the director, permit me to say, Mr. John Hollingsworth, who is unwell, I would want to use this opportunity really to wish him the best wishes and the ministry's best regards, because he's done a lot of fantastic work, and the only reason he's not here is because he is unwell. But when we were having our conversations in relation to persons with disabilities, we spoke about the need for training. And we started a lot of that training. And we need to continue some of the training that we would have done. The last 2 points is, I think, in relation to being able to get people to hire persons with disabilities, we have to do a lot more PR. We have to do a lot more public relations. We have to do a lot more public education around the benefits, because there's this view that you have to make all these changes. And we've hired so many people with disabilities in the ministry, and we didn't really have to make any changes. The hardest change for people to make is the discrimination that exists in their minds. So Barbadians need to realize that people with disabilities have competencies and skills and should not be judged on one single thing. And in any event, the biggest disability really is the disability we carry when we practice this discrimination. And then the last thing in relation to the quota system that I would want to say is that I was torn, because I really felt that we needed to find a way to insist on getting people employed. But I took the points from the private sector that perhaps we needed to do some work first and engage in conversations. So you're not going to see necessarily a cost in here for those engagements, but we plan to work with the private sector toward voluntary compliance, so that a person would agree voluntarily to hire persons with disabilities. I would like to agree, when we have these conversations, that 3 or 4 are hired and it's done voluntarily. If we were to force it in the legislation based on where we were, I think we would have got malicious compliance. And malicious compliance is not really compliance, and it would not give us what we wanted. You may get a case where we say 2, and 2 is all they hire, as opposed to 10, and so on. So I think we have to really build from the ground up. I must also take this opportunity to thank the private sector associations, because they've come to the meetings, they've put forward their ideas, they've never been contentious, they have never been disagreeable, even where we disagreed. And I really want to thank the associations, all of them, because we've been able to do wonderful work with their support in that context. I would ask the acting director, Mr. Nurse, to speak perhaps to some things that are happening at the NDU that I think will foster greater relationships between persons with disabilities and the labor space.
Good afternoon. We're Nurse, Acting Director, National Disabilities Unit. We at the National Disabilities Unit, one of our goals is to remove the barriers to social inclusion. And one of these barriers to social inclusion is employment. So as the Right Minister said, Minister Inkson, so what we are looking to do is to provide the training for persons with disabilities to put them in a position that they could then advance into work. So we have programs running like the Sign Language program. We have Flower Project, Work Experience program. So our plans for this year, though, we're going to continue working with the Ministry of Education with their artificial intelligence program, where persons with disabilities can get the chance to work in the area of cybersecurity and so on. Now, we have some reviews of persons who are actually involved in such programs, and some of them are still working and they enjoy the experience and so on. We're also going to continue to work with the Ministry of Labor in their Job Start program, once again looking for employment for persons, training and employment. Now, what we plan to do at the NDU, we want to introduce the Mangrove Agricultural Project, which will train persons with disabilities in food crop production. And we have entered into preliminary discussions with the Ministry of Agriculture. So you see, we're looking to involve other ministries and help us along as well. We plan to construct this sheltered workshop to teach persons with disabilities vocational skills. For example, the small engine repairs to wheelchairs. And so we have some plans for persons with disabilities to see how we can get them into employment, because we know that if we want them to improve, we got to make the create the opportunities for them to improve.
Thank you, Honourable Minister and Acting Director of the National Disabilities Unit. Mr. Chairman, my final supplementary relates to the trust fund which will be established under the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. And this is an extremely innovative idea and shows the vision of the Honourable Minister and his ministry and the committee too, sir, because I never take all the praise for it. The committee of which I chaired was an extremely competent committee. The Honourable Minister has called names of 2 persons who were on that committee, Mr. Neil Odell, Senator Andre Boyce, and the others who were on it, all either of whom had disabilities, the other half either parents or, in my case, sibling of a person with disability. And obviously, the Council for the Disabled and people like Rosanna Truder. But, you know, this trust fund, which is to be established, which would be able to accept funding from philanthropists and donors and other such persons, and also where mainstream ministry can put in funds and for the benefit of persons with disabilities, the improvement of their lives. And just wondering, Honourable Minister, how you contemplate this fund working, and if, again, within the programs that you have within your estimates, where they can probably tie in with this trust fund when it is finally established. Thank you too, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Member. So as you know, the NDU is going to be part of the Social Empowerment Agency. So the funds that are assigned to the Social Empowerment Agency will be the funds that cover, in these estimates, that will be the funds that cover any operation for the Social Empowerment Agency, which would also include the funds that would be necessary to finance the various committees that we anticipate we're going to have to form, either at the SEA, Social Empowerment Agency, specifically through child protection or through the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Bill. So you're just going to see a lump sum of funds. You're not going to see the breakdown because it's a board. But in relation to the actual administration of the fund, the Act permits at Section 84 for the establishment of the fund. And it says that the sources of the fund shall comprise income generated by investment made by the trustees, because we have to appoint trustees, any other donations from international, regional, and local donors. And we have found in this particular space that there are many people who are willing to give financial support to the ministry, people who are willing to give, provided that they are sure that the monies that they give are going to the cause that they are putting their money to. What they don't want is for us to put the monies into a big black hole, as many people think the government's funds are, when everything goes to the consolidated fund. But in a board, we could actually manage the funds in a separate account, so that those funds will be separate. So for anybody who's interested in giving donations to that fund, once the Social Empowerment Agency bill is passed, then we will come back and we will establish these committees and so on. It also speaks to funds being contributed to capital expenses of projects undertaken by the government. There can be also funds in exceptional circumstances can be used to the payment of restitution to a person who has suffered a loss as a result of the conduct of a person with disability who is unfit to stand trial. So we're also anticipating that we would use these funds to help out persons with disabilities who find themselves in trouble. At the end of the day, the funds really have that overarching clause that allow us to apply the funds almost for anything that is in relation to improving the lives of persons with disabilities. I look forward to the various proposals that I anticipate will come for financial support, but I also look forward more so to us being able to put forward packages. You know, the public service is really good at a lot of things, but the public service is not very good at doing proposals to attract financing. And the public service is not good at doing proposals to attract financing because the public service traditionally has never really been in the business of doing proposals to attract financing. The public service operates in a way that they have a proposal or they have a project and they submit it to the government for financing. And with these new arrangements, you're going to see, I think, a whole set of creative approaches to being able to attract finances, being able to apply those finances to projects that are worthy of financing, and then for us to be able to assess the impact of those projects as well. I think the benefit of having different people finance a project is that you have different people who are invested, different people who have skin in the game. And it allows you to monitor those projects with a little bit more closeness. So again, I look forward to it, Minister. I do not know all of the various manifestations of support that will come, but I look forward to it. And I believe that in keeping with the bill, the persons who will be part of this board and part of the trustees will be persons with disabilities who I anticipate will be best able to pursue things in their own interests. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in thanking the Honourable Minister and his team for the work they've done and their responses, I wish to place on record for these estimates the names of the other members of the committee who, you know, and thank them for their service to this country. The Honourable Carrie-Ann Eiffel, FB, Granville Carter, BSS, Sonia Rollins, Larry Smith, attorney at law, Silk, and Joyanne Haig, and also the director of the NDU, substantive director, John Hollingsworth, who the minister mentioned in one of his responses, the other members of the, or were the other members of the committee. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to, commend the minister and ditto everything that was said before with reference to the work that you are doing and the good work you're doing in your ministry. I said when I took on the baton from you in the blue economy, I had the Usain Bolt moment. In this ministry, I can say you probably had the cast of cement, the long distance moment, because we have already ran and you stayed the course. I want to go and date ourselves and our eyes 0427, this program that is dealing with welfare. I represent your constituency and I recognize that you have an increase of about $7 million or so in that vote from last financial year. And as I traverse my constituency, the Onfullus of Christchurch, of course, I often get complaints from persons who are what you call welfare clients. And I don't know if you could call it a perennial concern, but there's a ever-present concern amongst persons living in Gull Hill, Silver Hill, Vauxhall, you name it. And their complaint to me as their MP is that there is something called a stasis period in welfare, when persons are being reviewed. And during this review period, unfortunately, and I know, Minister, that you are working assiduously to put a system in place, but during this review period, unfortunately, persons are put off the list. I call it a stasis period where I don't know what support mechanisms are put when they're being reviewed, but the often complaint is that they are put off the list until this review happens, and then sometimes it may take 3-4 weeks, sometimes months, before they are put back on this welfare list. I want to know how you are dealing with this obvious quagmire, and if there are any other systems that you put in place during what I call the inactive period when persons are not given this welfare care. If there are other systems, and how you're looking to address this long term, because as I said, this is a constant problem, at least for me as MP.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will let the Chief Welfare Officer answer that question, but first I would want to take this opportunity to wish you a very happy birthday today. And, and to thank you for spending it. Thank you for spending it with me. But the Chief Welfare Officer, please address the concern by the Honourable Member.
Yes, indeed, at the Welfare Department and future the Social Empowerment Agency, we definitely will be looking at how we can better provide for the individuals who inadvertently were cut off by this as it relates to the system. We're looking at better processes in terms of to be able to address that need that we recognize where we would have been defaulted.
I'm happy that there's a solution in the not too distant horizon. My second question is, and I'm going to sub-program 8304, which is the HIV component. There's also the National Wellbeing and HIV Commission under sub-program 0440. And over the last couple of weeks, Minister, I would have heard you lament the fact that we are having some issues as it relates to not only sexual transmitted infections, but the fact that Barbadians, based on their maladaptive patterns of behaviors, social and otherwise, could be giving your ministry some concerns, because the fight against HIV and STDs is not only one of health and the health ministry. We understand that there must be an unsiloed approach, and the social services ministry, like yourself, must be at the fulcrum of this solution. That being said, Minister, I want to know if there is indeed a problem, a change, a rise, or there's a change, or there's a cause for concern. And secondly, what is your ministry with the new scope, change of name and everything, National Wellbeing and HIV Commission? What is your response to any concerns that you may have?
I would ask the Director of the Wellbeing and HIV Commission to address that, the Acting Director.
Good afternoon, Chair. Lynn Armstrong, Acting Director, National Wellbeing and HIV Commission. With respect to the Minister's concerns and what he would have said publicly, you have asked about the change in terms of numbers, which falls under the purview of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. However, we in the Wellbeing and HIV Commission, we have sought to expand our mandate beyond just HIV to include well-being. We have two major interventions, one called Manaware, which targets men, where we share our information, we update. While men are waiting for haircuts, we have HIV educational games, we do condom distribution, and we seek to, we acknowledge that the education is always going to be needed, sir. The well-being for us is something new, something that we are fleshing out, is multidimensional, but we realized that we needed to get past the strict HIV and STI program, so we are now looking to engage the social, emotional, mental, spiritual, physical, and economical aspects of our clients. But I cannot speak to the specific statistics. You will get that information, I'm sure, when the Ministry of Health and Wellness is in the well. We know what areas we are responsible for. So my department will continue to take care of the social needs of all persons living with HIV, which include housing. We deal with housing issues. We deal with supplementing the social support needs. Sometimes our clients are welfare clients, and or they may be collecting a bag of provisions from the HIV food bank, which can only last now a week. We try to supplement where we can, but we deal with the wider social aspects of HIV and the other multi-sectoral areas that the Ministry of Health and Wellness, their specific responsibility is care, treatment, and as I said, I can't speak to the numbers, but I'm sure that well, Minister would have spoken, and that is on public record, but we know that the STIs, the rise in STIs, sexually transmitted infections, is indeed on the increase. But I leave that for those powers that be to speak to that.
Thank you. My final question, I mean, I don't know how you will be able to face, albeit that is my specialty, those in the toilet of their years in my constituency, the elderly, unless I ask a question in the defense of the elderly, and they're dear to my heart as well. 0595, Elder Affairs. I see, Minister, and I want to thank you for the innovation and the scope, because you have put over $1.5 million or so to be able to help those who are enjoying those very, 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 very important toilet moments. There is a phenomenon that is creeping up in Barbados, unfortunately so, and it will always get the angst from me as Minister of Environment, National Beautification. And this phenomenon is what I term granny dumping, where persons leave their elderly, their loved ones, persons under their care at the hospital and other facilities. I am saying that this is something that should be frowned upon by every single Barbadian. And I know your ministry has been speaking out against this type of behavior. I want to know what we are doing from your ministry's perspective to combat this, as I said, this new unfortunate phenomenon in Barbados. And whether it is from the area of legislation or social intervention, whatever you are doing, and to speak about it, because I think that is something that we need to have a conversation in Barbados about. It is not something that we want to recognize as who we are as a people. And I always want to give you the opportunity to speak about this unfortunate phenomenon.
Honourable Member, I believe, well, just on the estimates, firstly, we have 2 sets of elder estimates. You would notice that in the first, where we speak of elder affairs and the family, that used to previously be in the estimates as family and elder affairs. And we just separated the 2. So it's not necessarily a new head. We just accounted for it as a separate head so that to make it easier for us to separate what we're doing for the elderly and so on. And then we also have in the estimates, I think it's 430, which is NAB related. But your question specifically is about persons who drop off the elderly at the hospital and so on. That is just perhaps one of the worst manifestations of elderly abuse, but there are many other manifestations. I've also been very conscious to try to be balanced in this conversation. I know people expect that because I'm minister, I'm going to be like really brutal on persons who do it, but I've also had conversations with persons who've done it and who believe that it is, in their view, the best way to ensure care for people that they love, in that they do not have the capacity to handle their elderly relative. And when they go to the hospital, they do not have the capacity at home, the facilities to receive them. So between not having the capacity to finance or to care or to feed them, some people have made that choice. Do I support that choice? Definitely not. But I understand that that's why some people have done it. And then other people have done it because people want to do the easy thing, drop off their elderly relative and go where they have to go. I've had conversations with a constituent an elderly constituent who told me that the person who's supposed to care for her, a family member, would push her in the corner and lock the wheelchair and just leave her there for the entire day. If a fire broke out in that house, she couldn't possibly move. And when we tried to have the conversation with the elderly person changed their story because they were so scared. So I understand the psychological impact, and I understand it as what it is, elder abuse. And I know the Ministry of Health has also spoken out about it, the increase in the numbers of persons. That is why I think we have to be holistic. I think the daycare component that we are proposing is going to be vital to allow people to do that, but also moving some of those persons into some of the residences that we're going to be constructing. The cost of caring for a person in the hospital, I don't have the statistics, but I do know that it is significantly more expensive than if we were to house them in a facility like the ones we imagine at Sterling. So on the one hand, I do not want it to happen, and we have to work with the families to make sure it doesn't happen. I think we also have to look at how pensions are assigned. In the case of non-contributory pensions, you can stop that because that's the government's contribution. But when a person has their own pension, like a personal pension, contributory pension, you can't just stop it. And a lot of family members, you will be surprised to see that when an elderly person is suffering, you can hardly find a family member to take care of that elderly person. When the person dies or is being close to transitioning, then so many persons show up to fight for that pension. Many persons take access to the pension and do not even care for the elderly person. But the legislation that we currently have on the books do not allow us to do anything about that. And I think the new legislation allows us to at least have a bit more involvement in that. The other thing that we were trying to address, which is very similar, is the power of attorney, whether it's lasting power of attorney or otherwise, and how people are able to distribute their assets. And we now have a draft bill. I think we sent it back out for further consultation in relation to how people are able to assign their assets. Because as it stands now, if you have a power of attorney and then you lose cognitive capacity, the power of attorney becomes null and void. And so we have to find a way, I don't know if null and void is the accurate legal language, but it's no longer applicable. And we have to find a way to look after persons in those circumstances. So it is a very complex situation, Minister. I do take the point, though, that when persons are dropped at the hospital, it does not apply itself well to the way Barbadians consider their values. And so it is something that we're seeking to address. As I said, through the consultations, through the increasing the number of elderly residences that we have constructed, and also by looking at how we apply pensions and incomes that come in as a consequence. Because you can't tell me you drop off your elderly relative at the hospital and expect to still be drawing the person's pension in its entirety to do for all of your own fine dining and other things. And that is something that we're seeking to address.
And just to close by saying that I know that modesty is your middle name, and you at some point in time will be able to tell Barbadians about the plans that we have to have these elderly facilities across the length and breadth of Barbados in due order. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, sir. Minister, very short question. Are you, as Minister, happy with the amounts allocated for the Welfare Department?
I don't remember there are no amounts allocated for the Welfare Department, these estimates. There's an amount allocated for the Social Empowerment Agency. So I cannot honestly answer that question.
All right. Within the amounts allocated to the agency, the department that is traditionally known for making contributions to individuals, I assume that there will be an amount allocated in that way. And I would want to assume that you and your ministry would have an idea as to the amounts that you would be required to pay to these persons who are in need of help. I would assume that you and your ministry would have such a figure. And if you don't, well, that is rather unfortunate. But if you do, my question stands as to whether you are happy as minister with those amounts that will be available to you and to your ministry to contribute to individuals. Thank you very much.
I suspect, Honourable Member, the grants to individuals at 314 under the Social Empowerment Agency of $33 million is the figure that I think we're addressing.
Yes, that's correct. At 314, that's correct. So that my question is, are you happy with that figure? Are you satisfied that that figure is sufficient to allow you to carry out the work of the ministry in meeting the needs of those several persons who will require that assistance?
So in a nutshell, Honourable Member, I would say I am satisfied. And I would have to say I'm satisfied considering that the proposal came from the ministry in the first place.
Yes.
So yes, I would have to say I'm satisfied. But let me answer your question, because I understand where you're going with the question, and let me try to answer the question respectfully and in its entirety.
Yes.
So that traditionally, the ministry has been given, in terms of grants to individuals, and if the Chief Welfare Officer were to speak, the number of things that we do to persons or for persons as grants. The monies over time have fluctuated, but these last two accounts, we would have done the most contributions toward persons that has ever been done in terms of grants to individuals. The entirety of the package of the ministry, and it is something that I believe very sincerely, Honourable Member, the entirety of the package that we offer is beyond the financial contribution. The reason I don't really worry about the 33 million here is because there has never been a time where I have asked for additional resources in a supplementary and have not received it. So that even if I were to run out of money by the end of the financial year, then I am satisfied that the Prime Minister that I know and the Minister in the Ministry of Finance that I know and the Cabinet that I sit in would allow me to get additional monies if I needed them. The 33 million that you also see here is actually, the last few years it was around $28 million, $29 million. We normally go for a supplementary of about $2-3 million. The $33 million that we have here would be the sum of the monies that we have asked for and an average increase based on the supplementary that we've had to ask for over time. So that this money that you have in the estimates is actually more than we normally would have asked for, but we based it around what we normally ask for plus the supplementary. So the supplementary amount that you will see, actually when we came into office, the 2017 budget for the Ministry of Social Care was about 79 in total. The total budget, not the welfare budget, the total budget was $79 million. This budget for this administration, for this ministry, is $118 million. This is by far the greatest amount of monies that have been assigned the last 2 years for these kind of services. So yes, Honourable Member, I am satisfied. But as I said to you this morning, Honourable Member, I believe that we have to do more than just offer social assistance in places where we are offering support, so that the measure of the performance of the ministry or the measure of the benefits that an individual receives from this ministry must be seen beyond dollars and cents. So that the $33 million, while it is significant and it's in keeping with what we think is effective and enough, I think we offer counseling now in ways we haven't done so. We've been offering support with housing through the Ministry of Housing in ways that we haven't done previously. We've been doing a lot more training in this agency, there's a transformative element where training becomes a part of what we offer. So, I mean, I have no worries whatsoever in relation to the $33 million that is being offered here, Honourable Member.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Now, one would obviously think that an increase over last year would be logical when one considers the element of inflation. But let me get to another question. Last year, and you did take the historical approach, so let us stay with that historical approach. Last year, it was disclosed in this chamber that a lump sum payment was made to an organization, and that is now a matter of historical record and fact that this payment was made to this organization, it was something of a pity that the name had to emerge, and I will try not to mention the name, except to mention the organization which houses the homeless, and to ask you whether this year that contribution will be repeated, and whether this year that the expenditure of those amounts will be audited.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The monies that were assigned to the Alliance to End Homelessness, I mean, there's nothing to hide. We assigned last year $500,000.
Yes.
My position was last year, and my position is exactly the same. In fact, my position is reinforced by the results of this year. Because last year it was more of an experiment, but in the sense that... It was more of an experiment. Because in the sense that we would not have done it. We would not have known the results. We had a position.
In the sense, no, I'm not hearing you. In the sense that you would not have done it.
In the sense that it would be the first time.
Yes, yes.
So now I'm in a position to say to you with clarity and certainty that because what we did was that the position on homelessness is that you would have seen, people say there's been an increase in homelessness. We measured, because we did a study on the number of persons to be homeless. There was a concern in Barbados that there was an increase in homelessness. Particularly during the day. The Alliance to End Homelessness, we had 3 proposals before us, not from different persons. In the ministry, we came up with different ideas. We were thinking of creating a center ourselves to be able to house persons who were homeless. And a number of persons in Barbados who are homeless are the transient poor, people who are homeless temporarily because of some condition. But a number of persons who are homeless have other issues. They need mental help, they're on drugs, there are a number of issues. And when we started looking at the numbers, to set up a government agency, to be able to manage that, as it does for almost any government agency, pushed us in the millions of dollars. When we had the conversations about how could we handle homelessness, the Alliance to End Homelessness has, I think, about 60 beds during the day. Because the Alliance was closed during the day, it was easier for us to ask persons to be able to use that facility during the day. And then they also provided additional nursing care, so persons were getting assistance with nursing, they were getting assistance with medical care, treatment, and so on. That was the part of the package. So that if we were to try to offer that service as the government alone, we could not have done it. I've already said in this place last year, I'm saying it again this year, fundamentally my philosophical, personal position is that the government has to be able to do some of these things through the agencies that do this work. The only question I think that would be of real value is, has the government received reports on what has been occurring there? And then the second question, which is your question, is, are we prepared to audit for the spending? And yes, we've received the report, so we have no concern with the reports. We've also visited, and we had no issues. Obviously, there are things in any relationship that you would want to be improved. Those were minor things, but we were working on the relationship. And then, yes, to answer your question, in these estimates, we put in, I think, a sum of $200,000 for us to be able to audit. For us to be able to audit the NGOs, particularly the NGOs that receive the larger sums of funds from the government. And when that audit is done, there's no intention of making it a secret. And I have said publicly, in fact, I introduced the idea of the audit before, and I said that the audit is to ensure that the things that we set out to do are done, and that we can report to the people of Barbados what has been done. And in cases where things are done that were not supposed to be done, then for us to make the necessary corrective action. So, Honourable Member, to answer your question, yes, the same sum of funds are available, and yes, we've put in place monies to audit.
Thank you very much.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come back and rejoin after having to to postpone my other two questions as I was dealing with urgent matters as relates to other things for the government. I wanted to ask you, Minister, I remember from other estimates debates, we all signal how much of an impact the companion program with the care of the elderly has had on the people of Barbados. And I also know, I don't know if it was mentioned before when I was out of the room, but I also know that you said very clearly in your opening statements that we are an aging population. And therefore, we had not prepared appropriately for managing an aging population. And I do accept that this is not an absolute solution, but it is making a dent in terms of assisting those who are getting on in years and having, if nothing else, a companion to assist them and help them do one or two things around the house. And what I was asking is, how has your program continued to succeed? And are there any plans to expand it? Because obviously, if we have that aging population, and if we have a program that has been successful, then obviously the next thing was, if it's working, look to see what you can do to improve it. If there's any plans to expand, or what other means are you looking to improve the program?
I would ask before I speak, I would ask the Deputy Director of the National Assistance Board, Ms. Hamilton, to address the program so you could get some details on the program, and then I will speak in relation to our plans going forward.
Good afternoon, Chair. I am Teresa Hamilton, Assistant Director, Acting National Assistance Board. What I want to say is that the Community Elder Care Program enhances the home care program. The Community Elder Care Program has 420 workers with 867 recipients. Home care has 1,347 recipients with 144 workers. Obviously, a ratio of 1 to 9, which should ideally be a ratio of 1 to 4. So after the home care worker goes in and assists with the bathing, cooking, washing as necessary, then the community elder care worker would go in and do interactive activities with the elderly. And as such, that keeps them entertained. They read the Bible, they sing, interact with them so that prolongs, that gives that elderly person a sense of companionship, that when the home care worker leaves, that there will be that continuation of service. Thank you.
So, Honourable Member, the elder care program is one that is obviously very near and dear to our hearts. We would have seen, all of us who are on the ground, the difference that this has made. Recently, I was at Sky Mall. I just stopped to get something. And an elderly gentleman stopped me to thank me for the elder care program. I had to tell him it wasn't my program. I didn't design it or anything. I just happened to be the minister at the time. But he thanked me for the program and what a difference it has made to have somebody just come over and spend some time with him. The population of Barbados is aging, and I do not know that I could say this enough. I do not think Barbadians are preparing for what is to come. I do not think Barbadians are preparing for the aging phenomena that is occurring in Barbados. The vast majority of Barbados will be over 50 very soon. And when you combine the fact that our population is aging on the one hand, and we're not getting any children on the other hand, it means, therefore, that the population of people who are coming up to support that older population is shrinking. In the literature, it's called the dependency ratio. What is happening now is that you're going to have a dependency ratio that becomes problematic because you have a very small, and that the ratio is really defined as the working population that supports the non-working population. So you're going to have a very small working population to support an expanding non-working population. that is going to be problematic. And at the same time, you still have to manage the few children that are coming along. So that is going to mean that the cost of care is going to become extremely difficult. So yes, we need to have more companions over time, I think, but I also think that we have to ask persons, particularly now while they can, just watch what you eat, try to exercise, even for myself, get some rest, do the things now that you're younger that would allow you to age without becoming ill. The problem is that a lot of Barbadians, the question isn't that Barbados is the oldest society one of the oldest societies that's becoming the issue. It is that Barbados is one of the oldest and unhealthiest populations. So that in Japan, for example, and it's changing in Japan now too, but in Japan, for example, the population is older than the Barbadian population, but they're healthier because of the way they ate, because of the fact that they exercise, and more importantly, because of the social relations that they have. So we have to be able to tell persons, eat properly, exercise a bit more. I mean, I've always been very honest about my health. I just tested my blood pressure the other day for the first time in my life, and the numbers didn't make me smile. So I know that I also have to check myself. And I think all the persons in this room, all 30 of us who are MPs, must do these tests, go and check your health, make sure that, because you're no good to anybody if you're sick or dead. So go and do the necessary tests, and I'm asking all Barbadians to do the tests. And then in relation to the elder care program, I think it is a case where we need to have more elder care support for sure because of the aging dilemma that we have. But I also think family members have to do something. Again, if the National Assistance Board Director were to speak, she would tell you there were cases where we send our staff to houses. And there was a video. And let me say this. I saw a video from one of our staff members recently on social media in which the staff member was saying that she's not a maid or something like that. I can't remember the exact wording. And she's not a nurse and she's not here to do this. And people thought I was going to be upset, but I was not upset. In fact, I support her 100%. We don't send some of these workers there to do the things that people are asking them to do, especially in cases where you go to a house. There are family members in the house who refuse to have any kind of care responsibility for their elderly relative because an officer from the National Assistance Board is visiting. And that is not right. So if we send you there to cook or to clean or to help, it doesn't mean that every single responsibility of the household, while healthy persons are in the household, fall upon the National Assistance Board workers. And I support, of course, it's probably not the best way to do it, but I support the workers because at the end of the day, people have to be treated, regardless of the profession, with dignity. The elder care workers have to be treated with dignity and with respect. The home care workers, the same. The social care workers, the same. We had situations where people set dogs on child care officers. People don't know the reality. People set dogs on child care officers when they go there. People threaten the welfare officers with violence when they come to their houses and so on. We do this at a risk. The officers do this at a great risk to their health. And, I don't think that we want to be the kind of government that would allow that. So yes, of course we need to have more people, but I also think people also have to stand up and take responsibility and take charge of the persons who have blood relations or other social relations.
Thank you, Minister. As clearly, I guess a statement that you obviously know, but the Barbadian population is taking on the characteristics of a first world nation. But of course, the Barbados population is taking on the characteristics of a first world nation, but without first world resources. And that is the problem that we're having to face. My final question, Minister, has to do with an ad I believe I saw in the press at one point where your ministry put out that you were looking for people to rent properties and you were prepared to offer, I think, 3 times the deposit to encourage people to do that. And I believe it's something that I would have encouraged you, even before, from your predecessor's time, to take on, because I thought the biggest impediment to finding places for people to rent when you needed them was that landlords often say that government takes long to pay, and it's difficult, they had to wait long to get paid and so on. So I was just asking what success have you had getting places to rent bearing in mind that you are looking to rent properties at a time when lots of people are taking their properties out of the rental market and actually putting them into new phenomena, as we call the shared accommodation, Airbnb, HomeAway, VRBO, and those, which has meant that the apartment market on the whole across Barbados has been reduced. So therefore, access to rental properties is reduced or now coming at a premium. And so with that, and working against that additional tide, I was wondering what success have you had with that? Because obviously you have that difficulty in looking to find rental properties for people as required.
Well, I would let the director, the head of the resilience unit, Mr. Andrew Pollard, start the question, and then the PS will add.
Good afternoon, Andrew Pollard, Resilience and Reintegration Unit. I like the point you ended with there, Minister. The success we've been having is that, or rather let me say what contributes to our success in having landlords is that we are more or less recycling landlords. And contributory to that is the provision of, or the provision of the houses for persons who are in accommodation for Hurricane Elsa and such, like, and persons who have experienced fire and that sort of thing. So once the houses are prepared for them, then we are able to quickly recycle. I should say that we have about 65 landlords who are more or less committed to work with us. Actually, there are some who refuse clients otherwise just so that they could work with us. And I think that is, I think kudos must go to the staff in the Resilience and Reintegration Unit, because they're social workers. So we not only provide temporary accommodation, but we provide it with feeling and with emotion. And both not only to the persons we are placing in accommodation, but also to the landlords. So sometimes you will have landlords bringing fruits or something like that, just as not a bribe by any means, but just by way of acknowledging the kindness and the sort of attitude with which they are treated. So I would say that generally, we are having good success, not in terms necessarily of new landlords, but particularly in terms of retaining landlords. And that we found also too that word of mouth is important for us. So landlords encourage other persons to come on board with us.
Thank you, Mr. Pollard. Minister, one of the biggest concerns that the landlords have expressed to us is the fact that they consider that government takes long to pay. And we have assured the landlords that we are working with that doesn't apply to the situation here. Indeed, over the last year or so, we have significantly increased the speed at which we make payments, and that has counted for quite a bit. I wish to compliment Mr. Pollard and his unit, the Reintegration and Resilience Unit, because we try as best as we can to ensure that we have a very close relationship with landlords. We give them the opportunity to consult us, because there's this perception in some quarters that if we put these persons who have had or are faced with emergency situations in terms of fires and so on, that somehow when these tenants get into these units, that they will destroy those units. That is not the case at all. And I wish to take this opportunity to say to those landlords who may be listening to this discussion, that the ministry makes a payment of 3 months along with a security deposit. And we ensure that payment is made within a period of 2 weeks to 30 days. We try to, obviously there are 1 or 2 persons that would have fallen through the cracks, but generally speaking, the payments are made on a very timely basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that has gone a long way, but you didn't answer the question of how many have increased since you started that, or you may not have that measure? So how many, since you started that new program, how many more landlords have come on board that otherwise had not, if you have that number?
No, unfortunately, I don't have that number with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we don't have the number here, but we need more.
Oh, of course.
I want to say to anybody who has a property to rent, that the government is committed to paying the rent 3 months up front. We're committed to paying on time. We would like people to come forward and to offer us rentals. There have been some cases, if we're being honest, where some of the clients have not treated the people's property properly, and that has upset some of the landlords, and we're working with our clients to offer counseling and so on. But we want to encourage landlords to come forward and to give them the assurance that we will pay them up front and on time, so that they can be certain that they wouldn't have to have any financial difficulties as a result of the relationship with us. So if you have a property for rent, please come forward and rent it to the government of Barbados. Thank you.
Well, I can't say any better myself. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Chair, I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
I'm sorry that you've done that. I don't think the 6 hours have expired. So,
We're
what's the break?
breaking.
Oh, okay, thank you very
Pay
much.
attention.
Say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 10 minutes past 5.
The question is that this honourable chairman be suspended until 10 after 5 p.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 5:10 p.m.